You are Locked On Hawks Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
To the Locked On Hawks Postcast, your home for the best Atlanta Hawks talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra. Batiste. Alongside me is NBA and college basketball analyst DeShaun Tate. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NBA for $20 off your first purchase. And the Locked On Hawks Postcast is also part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So we're kind of glad he got Trae, we'll explain. And the guy Trae got swapped with has been moved from the team that acquired him in that trade. And we'll talk about the impact of that mind-blowing move. But first, let's talk takes on how the Hawks finally found their mojo in the Motor City with a 132-130 win over the Pistons to snap an 8-game skid. But for you, Tate, you said the Hawks didn't play like a team on an 8-game losing streak. But then again, they did play like a team on an 8-game losing streak.
Sounds confusing like a tongue twister, I know. Let me break it down a little bit. So the reason I say that the Hawks didn't play like a team that was on an 8-game losing streak is because when you look out there and see them, you're like, man, like teams that are on 8-game losing streaks, they look abysmal. They look like they have every reason. Like when you look at them, it doesn't reflect how the Hawks have recently been competing during that losing streak. They just look like they have no business being out there on the floor with any of the other teams. They're just turning the ball over like crazy. Like you see exactly all the reasons behind why they're on an 8-game losing streak. And that's not the Atlanta Hawks. I think if you asked anybody around the league or maybe even people who've just been paying attention a little bit, watching some of these Atlanta Hawks games over the course of the losing streak, they will tell you that doesn't look like an 8-game losing streak type of team. Like, Agreed. Yes, maybe the opposition may have won that game, but the Hawks just optically did not look like a team on a losing streak of that nature. But I say that they did look like a team on an 8-game losing streak is because they continued to be consistent, but they play with some urgency, right? Yeah. They look like a team that knew that they were on an 8-game losing streak and that it had to be snapped and that it wasn't going to be snapped any other time except for tonight. So that's kind of what I meant by that specifically. I know kind of like the elephant in the room, things that we have been talking about recently is how bad this team had been doing, some of the things that helped them lose some of the games, specifically when you start talking about shooting from three. They shot 43% from three, much improved from the last amount of games. You start talking about from a turnover standpoint, still too many, still 14, still too many in the teens. And while you do definitely have to correct that, I still believe that when you start factoring in shooting from free throw, we know we needed them to at least be bare minimum 80%, really needed them to be north of that. They were at 82. I think some of those little things is what helped contribute to them ultimately getting over the hump past the Pistons tonight. And it was bound to happen. Had a good feeling it was probably going to happen against the Pistons, and it did.
Yeah, I kind of felt the same, and I'm not sure why, because let's just be honest, although the Pistons are 500 now, at 25-25, they also have some all-stars in there, right? So they are playing solid basketball, especially thinking about where the Pistons have come from, number one. And number two, the Pistons, similar to the Chicago Bulls, similar to the Charlotte Hornets, they are just pesky for the Hawks, no matter who takes the court, whether it's with or without Cade Cunningham, as we've seen over the last couple of years as he's been injured and out for the season. So I felt like it was going to be the game for them, but I wasn't sure just because the Pistons always seem to kind of give them fits in a way that makes your head and mine, it's a head scratcher. But I want to go back to something that you said about where this team has been in this 8-game win streak. We're talking about a New York Knicks team that only beat them by 9 points, right? And they competed. Detroit obviously beat them by 10 about a week and a half or so ago, but hey, it's payback, so it's all good. Toronto, one of them was okay. It was just a 3-point loss. We all know that other one we're just going to call that a one-off and keep it moving. And when you lose to Cleveland, when you get blown out, well, that's payback too, because hey, team that's in 1 or 2 across the entirety of the association so far this season that you already beat twice, you kind of knew this was coming.
You did.
Indiana, Minnesota, competed. So as frustrating as it was for us to have to talk about loss after loss after loss, at least you and I were not talking about effort. We weren't talking about heart. We were just talking about, hey, in those little areas, 3-point shooting, in the little area of a free throw where maybe you should have been at 80, 82%, maybe you were at 79, or that particular night you needed to be at 90 and you were at 85. Those were the little things that the Hawks did just enough tonight, and defensively as well, did just enough tonight to be able to walk out of that arena with a win. And maybe one of those things as well, one of those reasons as well, we're going to talk about the main reasons in segment 2, but also want to give a shout out to DeAndre Hunter. Mm-hmm. First time he was in the starting lineup since October 25th. And he had a really, really good first half. We're talking about 12 points in the first quarter. And this is after an abysmal performance on Saturday. He played 29 minutes, only scored 4 points. This time he had 15 points in his first 10 minutes and ultimately finished the game with 20 points. Now, yeah, you know me, I would love to have seen him do a little bit more on the defensive side of the court. But on the same token, this was a night where, if we're being honest, if you're not going to do anything defensively, because no rebounds, no steals, no blocks, at least go 7 of 14 from the field, 4 of 8 from 3, 2 from the free throw line, and give the Hawks the 20 points because they needed every single point that DeAndre Hunter gave them. And this is one of those things where right now, yes, you know, you pretty much have a healthy Trae, so you're going to see him pretty much every night starting lineup. Dyson Daniels, for the most part, seems like he's back healthy. We'll see him. Onyeka Okongwu, well, we just don't know. We'll probably know by Thursday. How much more we're going to see of him in the starting lineup, but as of today, we don't quite know. And then you got those other Zachary Risache. We know we're going to see him. Where it goes from there, that's a question mark. Tonight, it was DeAndre Hunter, and tonight he actually gave you everything that you needed for the most part for him in the starting lineup.
I'm glad that you said that, Tenitra, because I think now with him being inserted to the lineup with this particular crew, I think this now makes it the 19th different. If I'm not mistaken, I could be totally wrong, so forgive me, but I think this is the 19th different look of a rotation in terms of the starting lineup that they have had all season. If I had to guess, right, that's probably leading the NBA in different starting lineup rotations. But,
right.
You know, me and you kind of talked about this. I think we were kind of going over some different subject titles that we were kind of going to discuss and what have you, I think about a week or two ago. And I'm like, is it time that we start talking about maybe DeAndre Hunter being implemented into the starting lineup? And here it is that we're actually having that conversation. And I wanted to wake this up because while I do definitely appreciate Robert for chiming in with us, and thank you to him and everybody that chimes in with us via the comment section, is that his concern is that Hunter didn't get a rebound or an assist. Now, I will tell you one thing. I think sometimes there's some balance that I have to live on the same side or different sides of the fence when it comes to Tenitra, because while she is just as a person that's like, hey, win is a win is a win. And while I definitely agree with that pretty much every time, that doesn't mean I always have to like my wins to look the way that they do sometimes. This one, I'm totally on board with Tenitra.
Yeah.
A win is a win is a win. I needed this one. They needed this one. We needed this one. We got this one. And it was because of the fact that DeAndre Hunter, and give credit to the staff for a guy who's been implemented, gotten really settled into being a guy coming off the bench for what, 5 months now, 4 months probably, whatever, and then being re-implemented. Of course, you're thinking about what's going through his psyche, because I think what helped his confidence was going to the bench. Now you're bringing him off the bench, and it's almost like, okay, I can't go back to being the guy that I was when I was in the rotation before, kind of thing. So I think that that's something that kind of helped him a little bit. And something else I'll just say really, really quickly is that I think that in some ways Detroit had some vulnerability to potentially kind of overplaying with emotions. Like they're on a 2-game win streak. And while they haven't looked as good in recent games as they had within the last few weeks, they're one of the more improved teams, certainly at the top, I would say, amongst teams that are in the NBA, right? So I think some of them being a little bit overconfident and not knowing how to now be the hunted and used to being the hunter kind of changed things around for them a little bit, and that played into the hands benefiting the Atlanta Hawks tonight.
Yeah, because if you have a team coming in like the Hawks that are desperate, you have to be prepared that they're going to give you a fight and they're going to punch back until the bitter end because they want to end this streak, right? But how did they end it? They ended it with 11, so we're kind of glad he got traded. We'll explain in the and one. This episode of our Locked On Hawks postcast is brought to you by Game Time. Looking for tickets to your next big event, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or a sports game, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Game Time Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Game Time Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals, so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Game Time Picks myself, and here's why I and so many others love it. The curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price. No more sifting through thousands of options, and it's the super deal for a prime seat, and you won't believe the value. It's an absolute steal. And of course, the seat view feature is a game changer. Before you hit buy, you can see exactly what the seat will look like in the venue. And the best part, you're covered with Game Time's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Now, terms do apply, but again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. So download that Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. So Trae Young has coined a new phrase. So we know of last week that after the All-Star reserves were announced on Thursday, he said, you know what? At this point, maybe it shouldn't be called snub. Maybe it's trade, right? And so he said that in jest. But I said, as DeShaun, you always say, I was talking to you pre-production saying, you say you like this trade because this trade comes out with a little angry man kind of running the show or kind of dictating how he plays. And he kind of came out with that kind of fire. But I also like the fact that he didn't just come out with that fire. He ended with that fire. Trae went on an 11-point run all by himself in the fourth quarter, scores 17, of course, the game winner. And the 17 points accounted for a little over 61% of the team's points in the quarter. But again, you just love to see that no matter what, he's still never afraid to take that last shot that we thought was a 3. But of course, it was called back to a 2. But nonetheless, game winner it was. Trae did his thing again. And of course, ends up almost with a double-double, 34 points and 9 dimes on the night.
And you know what? I know that the haters and whatever will say, well, why do we have to feel like we got to get this version every time that he gets snubbed or whatever, or trade or what have you? This is just the Trae way, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know what
like
to make of it. Keep doing it. Like, of course, I don't want him to not, make it to All-Star or what have you. So, of course, read between the lines.
That's why we said kind of, yeah.
Of course. But it's like when you get this person, I mean, it's just a different, like, he's one of the guys, and again, I always say this, I've been watching Trae since he was 16 years old and learning how his mind works, if you will, but just learning what things trigger to a degree, right? Yeah. And this is a triggering thing. I'm not sure that he goes overboard with it, but he is a guy that when he's considered an underdog or he's being overlooked, he has this chip on his shoulder a little bit. Yep. He always remembers, and this is one thing that I will always tell people, or what I've kind of picked up about him, is that he remembers little things like this. He remembers little details. He knows who was there and who wasn't, and just little things like that. And I think sometimes it plays into effect, right? He's recently played against, teams. I mean, you start looking at a Pacers team. Siakam ended up getting the All-Star vote over him. Darius Garland in a recent game. In this situation, Cade Cunningham. There's no question. And that doesn't mean every time it's going to walk away with a win. But those are just some of the little things. And I'll tell you something else that I noticed in this game. There was a point in time where, 31 seconds left in regulation. This is a game that we already kind of thought might be going to overtime. Thank God it didn't.
Yes.
But Trae Young missed a free throw with 31 seconds left.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, here we go again, kind of thing. But if you kind of watch when those things typically happen for him, he makes up for it in a much bigger way at the end of the game. Maybe not every single time, but these are just little things to kind of take away that edge that he plays with and how he's ready for the big stage. These are those little things that when people are being combative and fighting back and say, no, Trae Young is, you know, a top 5 best point guard in this league, top 3 best point guard in this league. Some people even feel number 1 point guard in this league, whatever, what have you. These are the little reasons behind why he's in those conversations.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I can remember, for example, going back to the Lakers game, right, where he had that crazy shot at the end of regulation. And it's like, really, man? Like, for real. And then he made up for it in overtime. And then he addressed it and acknowledged it in the post-game press conference saying, hey, I realized like that wasn't a shot that I should have taken. So I can also appreciate him knowing when it's not a shot that he should take that he took. But like you said, that's very important that he has matured to the point where he realizes, okay, 31 seconds. I should have made that free throw, but I have 31 seconds. And if we can somehow get that ball back or have the final possession or make it so that even if the Pistons have the final possession, there's not enough time for them to get a shot off or win the game, then to me, it balances out. That's the mark of someone who's getting more mature. That's the mark of someone who's understanding situational basketball and how, hey, in that situation, if I happen to fail, then that's okay. I'm going to come back in the next situation and I'm going to do my thing. And I think one guy who seems to always understand situational basketball from tip to the end of regulation is Dyson Daniels. I mean, 3 steals, 2 blocks, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. That was in 13 minutes. He finishes with 19 points, 7 assists, 6 boards, 4 steals, 3 blocks. It's crazy. And when I looked at it, I said, wow, DeShaun, I think he might be quickly becoming 1B.
I don't know. I think
it's tough to call. It's tough to say.
It is. And I'm gonna tell you why. Because it's such a good thing sometimes that we don't know. I don't know if they know. I don't know if the opposition knows. Because of that, I don't think the Atlanta Hawks care. As long as they don't fall into what they're just creeping out of, which is another one of those losing streaks. Is it Dyson Daniels? Don't know, don't care. Is it DeAndre Hunter? Don't know, don't care. As long as that guy is whoever the guy is for that particular night, that's the 1B. It appears that it is Dyson Daniels, especially considering what he's able to give you consistently on both sides of the ball and all that good stuff. Because here again, I think we went from a period of time where we're talking about Dyson Daniels, and I get DeAndre Hunter's consistency all the way through, but that's been more so primarily on the offensive end more than it has been defense. But Dyson Daniels comes in, and I think it is some shock value or impact to it where he comes in. You only expect this really good defensive player, maybe not great, but you hear about how much better, right, he could be for you on defense. He ends up probably being better than you have anticipated on defense, certainly better than you anticipated on offense.
Yeah.
Then he kind of dips a little bit. He's not quite the offensive player consistently the way DeAndre was and whatever, what have you. And it just didn't look as good as it once did, but you still had the defense there, no question. Now you're starting to have that balance all over again where you're getting the offense and the defense, being able to kind of like a boxer, almost being able to switch up your fighting stances between, you know, being an orthodox fighter or what have you, unorthodox, and being able to switch back and make it difficult for the opponent where you throw them off and they don't know what to expect. That's kind of what Dyson Daniels has been a little bit for this team. And I think that it's good that he kind of leaves us in limbo sometimes where if there's ever a good time that you don't know what you're going to get, the good thing is that this would be that time that I do think that's a positive thing. And that next guy up tends to just sound good and sound cute and the right thing to say for a lot of teams. But I think it's good that this particular team has been one that definitely does step up and show out. Even Larry Nance in some big time threes for this team in clutch moments, I think has been really big. You never know who's stepping up. Sometimes it helps to not necessarily always know who that next guy is going to be.
Yeah, and I like that vantage point. I definitely do. And this is not to disagree, by the way. This is just a different take on it. The one thing I like about calling him a 1B or knowing that he's a 1B is Trae Young needs that next guy that he can count on night in and night out, right? And so I think that's where my mind went as well. Like he knew without question that he could count on Jalen Johnson. Even if Jalen Johnson was having an off night on the offensive side of the court, he knew that he was going to make up for it defensively. That's what Dyson Daniels does. He always finds a way to impact the game. Sometimes it's not numbers on any side or either side of the court, but that's the only thing. And again, that's not disagreeing with what you said, because yes, you make an excellent point about what everyone else needs to do, which is like legitimately be a next man up. But I like that Dyson Daniels is showing Trae Young that, hey, you might just have another guy that you can rely on and someone that can be trusted to handle the ball and trusted to be able to bring defense and really great two-way play night in and night out. Now, speaking of Trae, the guy that he got swapped with has been moved from the team that acquired him in that trade. We'll talk about the impact of what people are still saying was a mind-blowing move in Who Got Next. This episode of our Locked On Hawks postcast is brought to you by PrizePicks. Basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way to get in on the action than with PrizePicks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With over 10 million members and billions in awarded winnings, PrizePicks makes it easy and fun to turn your sports knowledge into real money. So here's how it works. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you could win up to 1,000 times your cash. PrizePicks even has a free pick for the big game, where Patrick Mahomes only needs to throw 1 yard to win. Pair that with one more correct pick and you're cashing out. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. And don't forget to check out the promos tab to tail any of the super sweet Millie Winners big game lineups. If you tail a lineup that goes 3 for 3, you can win a split of $1 million in promo funds. So don't forget, PrizePicks, download the app, use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup, because with PrizePicks, you can run your game. DeShaun, it was the shot heard around the world. So whether you were asleep, whether you woke up in the middle of the night for whatever reason and saw that your phone was blowing up, or if you were like me and were actually awake and someone sent you a screenshot and said nothing else, you then went down a rabbit hole and you were like, I'm about to check everything. Yeah, Sharon, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I need to go check to make sure this is really you. And then when I checked to see if it was really him, then I had to check again because everybody was like, oh my gosh, Shams got hacked. Man. Well, it turns out Shams Charania did not get hacked. He was correct in letting everyone know that the guy that Trae Young got swapped out for, Luka Doncic, is leaving the Dallas area. What do we call it? The Metroplex. He's leaving the Metroplex for Hollywood. So he is shipped off to the Los Angeles Lakers. Of course, the Mavericks get Anthony Davis, among other things. Obviously, we know there are more specifics to the deal than that. And granted, there was a deal done today as well. So nothing, no shorting of De'Aaron Fox or Zach LaVine. But let's just be real. The conversation that we're still having, 36 hours, almost 48 hours later, is about Luka. So one of the things that everyone's been saying is, wonder how this is going to change the face of how things are done, potentially done in the NBA. I mean, do you think this is one of those things where there might be some long-term implications, whether it's for the NBA or even maybe for how the Hawks approach things?
I don't know. I first of all, I love the way that it just kind of happened out of nowhere like that, the way that it did. It's almost kind of reminds me sometimes of when, somebody will just drop one of these mystery albums out of nowhere. I think Beyonce did it at one point in time.
All the time.
And I'm not really all that, in tune with it, but I think I recall her doing it. I think Drake did it once or something. I love just that idea of it sometimes. Catch everybody off guard. But I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm not sure. I'm honestly, I'm not sure. I think that in this particular situation, you have, I guess, the Atlanta Hawks I think it is something to at least be able to look at. It may have some implications potentially, maybe.
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't really know in necessarily all of which ways, but I do
Yeah.
think that there are times when you do have to have conversations in private that not every single person needs to know about. I think Danny Ainge was, quote unquote, and I'm paraphrasing, complaining about
Mhm.
not knowing that this was happening, and so many of the others. Now, there's no way that I believe that all of these people
Yeah.
had no idea. You know what I mean?
'Cause everyone's saying they didn't.
LeBron had no idea either, I
Right.
guess.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure I'm willing to go that far, but for what it means to Atlanta, probably not necessarily a lot. But
No.
I know that there are some people that are probably going to feel like, okay, as it relates to what we always relate Trae to, which is the
Yep. That was.
NBA draft and
Yep.
who he's tied to and all that. What does that mean for Trae?
Mhm.
Does that mean Trae is going to want to, make a move? Does that mean, hey, let's do something to try and get somebody over here to Atlanta, which I certainly hope is the case. And I wouldn't be mad if it was done in a similar way where it just caught everybody off guard. I
Mhm.
do think that it will make a difference for some teams. I'm just
Yes.
not sure that it'll make the biggest difference for Atlanta directly.
Yeah, I think it may just reignite the debate because last season we probably had the hottest debate about whether or not Trey was going to stay, Trey was going to go, whether or not the Hawks were going to retain him or whether or not the Hawks were going to move on from him. Because remember, everybody wasn't convinced that they were going to part ways with DeJounte Murray. A
Mhm.
lot of people were thinking that it might be Trey, and B, were okay with it being Trey. The reason I mention that is because when you trade a guy like Luka Doncic, the franchise, the face of the franchise, the future of the franchise, and maybe one of the faces of the league, it then says, is anyone really untouchable? Because that was the question. Remember, last year, most people for a long time were saying, yeah, nobody's untouchable with the Hawks except Trae Young. And then as the season went on, it was like,
Mm.
well, maybe he might be sort of kind of touchable, especially
Mhm.
when they went on that run when I think he was out for like 11 games.
Mhm.
But I
Mhm.
think when you see something like this with a Luka Doncic in the middle of a season, in like a thief in the night, middle of the night, it does make you think, okay, no, for real. Just about 99.9% of the league is not untouchable, right? So that's part one of it for me. And then I think part two of it, however, is when you see these kinds of moves, because remember, the Dallas Mavericks made a move at the trade deadline to acquire PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford. And that is a big part of what turned their season around and got them right into the
That's
NBA
right.
Finals.
That's
So, in
right.
my opinion, on my radio show this past weekend, I was asking which other team might make a similar move in order to put themselves on that trajectory. I don't think the Hawks are anywhere in that space. I don't think they have enough resources,
Mhm.
capital, or anything to be able to go after players that would allow them to get in position to compete with Boston or
Sure.
compete with Philly or the Bucks,
Sure.
the whole list of the
I
next
agree.
the upper echelon. But what it made me think about was whether or not they're going to start becoming bolder. Does
Mm.
this tell them that, hey, the
Mhm.
league is taking no prisoners for teams that want to move up, whether that's out of the play-in round, whether that's moving, to the top of the conference so that you can maybe get more home playoff series? That was my question on how I hope it might impact the Hawks. Like, man, people are out here getting bold. Are
Yeah.
you going to be bold too?
Right. I gotta see it to believe it. I'll be honest. This just has
Yeah.
always struck me, and I'm just being really transparent. Like it, love it, hate it, or anything in between. They've always struck me as the franchise that doesn't want to get that bold. If I'm
Yeah.
just being honest, like
Yeah.
I think that they don't want to kind of push the envelope too much or straddle the fence that closely or what have you. Kind of want to
Mhm.
play it in the safe zone a little bit more. I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
used to seeing them really their names coming up in big name trades. I'm not used to seeing them really do a whole lot during free agency.
True.
And so that's where I kind of think that they do kind of play more of the conservative background on that. I will say that if there is one guy, and I'll be honest with you, I think that Trae Young is one of the more. Not say anybody is untouchable. But if there is one guy in the league that belongs to or not belongs to a franchise, but is a part of a franchise
Tied
that
to,
would
yeah.
be considered untouchable, I think that it would be Trae Young, and sometimes to a fault of the
Yeah.
Atlanta Hawks, to be honest with you. When you haven't seen someone walk through the doors, respectfully to Joe Johnson,
Right.
respectfully to Josh Smith, and all of
Mhm.
the other really good to great players that have come through,
Yeah.
I would be a little bit remiss if I didn't mention that Trae Young is probably the closest thing to a, Dominique Wilkins that they've probably seen in
Mm-hmm.
this city in quite some time. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes to a fault that may
Mm-hmm.
make you want to hold on to somebody, regardless how great the offer is, a little bit longer than you probably should. Of course, always hoping that number 11 continues to be in a Hawk uniform, of course. But I
Yeah.
think that's just one of the things that kind of holds them back, is not being what you said, bold.
Yeah, that if we could maybe see some of that boldness, or if we would have seen some of that boldness, I think that would make you and I more confident that maybe a move, not saying parting ways with Trae Young, but just a bold move to kind of put themselves in the conversation of what's going on at the top of the league versus in the middle or at the bottom, shall we say, just stuck in, kind of play in purgatory. I think if we'd seen it before, then we'd be more comfortable thinking, okay, we still got 72 hours. Something could happen. But I suspect that when you and I reconvene Wednesday night, not much will have happened. At least not anything major. It's just kind of not the Hawks' way, at least so far, but we shall see. Anywho, Locked On Sports Atlanta is the number one place to hang out after every game. Remember to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And for more on the Hawks, check out Locked On Hawks with our guy, Brad Rowland. We'll see you next time.